Yesterday, I should say Wednesday, a Missouri man was executed. He was innocent. His name is Marcellus Williams. Marcellus Williams has been in prison for years for apparently a crime that he did not commit. Even the prosecutor tried to reach the governor to tell the governor, listen, he didn't get a fair trial. There's new evidence that shows this was not the guy. You cannot execute this guy. There were a number of people that called the governor's office because that's what you can do to try to get the governor to stop the execution. And the governor can do that, by the way, but it didn't work. So then people tried to escalate it to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court denied it. Let's get into this clip here from CNN. This is a travesty with our justice system, but it's not the first time that this has happened. We're going to get into this, and I'm going to tell you what I think should happen moving forward.
Tonight, a Missouri man has been executed by the state, but a deeply unsettling question remains. Was Marcellus Williams innocent? He was accused of killing Felicia Gale in 1998, but a re-examination of evidence raised questions about whether he actually did it. After years of investigations and hearings, Missouri Governor Mike Parsons stepped in this year and ordered the execution to move forward. Now, that was despite prosecutors, Williams's family, and even the family of Gale pleading to spare Williams's life. Now, that did not happen. And tonight, a last-ditch appeal to the Supreme Court was rejected with the 6-3 vote falling along ideological lines. A devout, practicing Muslim, Williams' last words were, "All praise be to Allah in every situation."
And this is another thing, too. Marcellus Williams was Muslim. I saw his son being interviewed, and his son was just saying, like, please, don't kill my dad. And I've never been one that agreed with the death penalty. Never have, never will, because I don't feel like it's really our role to end someone's life. And if we have a true rehabilitation system, shouldn't prison systems actually rehabilitate the prisoners and not kill people? Do you know how much it costs? Number one, let's talk about the economic factor. Do you know how much it costs to execute someone? We're talking about millions of dollars. It actually is more affordable to keep a prisoner in jail than it is to execute them on death row. But that's besides the point with this particular case, because Marcellus Williams was innocent. Anytime you have the prosecutor coming forward and the prosecutor is saying, wait a minute, this isn't right, we messed up. And regardless if they had all of the new evidence in front of them, the fact that the prosecutor said this man did not receive a fair trial, that in itself should have been enough to stop the execution. There's a lot of people that are pointing fingers at voters because of this. I've seen it on social media, people blaming those that didn't vote for Hillary Clinton in 2016 and said, this is all your fault because you guys didn't vote for Hillary Clinton. And that's how we ended up with this conservative court. And that's why he was executed. To that, I say this. Number one, blaming the voters is a bad strategy. Bad strategy. Number two, it's interesting how a lot of people are pointing their fingers at the Supreme Court instead of pointing their fingers at the governor, which is the first step. The governor decided to move forward with the execution. And what's crazy is that I would not be surprised if this governor, if he runs for re-election, if he's elected again. I've seen it happen before. But everybody's pointing fingers at the people who didn't vote for Hillary Clinton in 2016 instead of pointing their fingers at the governor of Missouri, who had the power to prevent this. It's been done before, and I'll show you in just a second.
The man's last meal, chicken wings and tater tots. And at 7:01 p.m. Eastern Time tonight, Marcellus Williams was given the lethal injection of the sedative pentobarbital, and 9 minutes later, he was pronounced dead.
At one point, he appeared to wiggle his feet, which were underneath a white sheet that's pulled up to his neck, moved his head slightly. Then I could see his chest heaved about a half dozen times. I didn't see any movement after that.
The death penalty, ladies and gentlemen. Neither family spoke after the execution, but many people in the public did. Nearly 100 people protesting outside of the correctional facility even today. But the governor, through a spokesperson, well, they defended the execution.
No juror nor judge has ever found Williams' innocence claim to be credible. 2 decades of judicial proceedings and more than 15 judicial hearings upheld his guilty conviction. Thus, the order of execution has been carried out.
With me now, St. Louis prosecuting attorney Wesley Bell, who is also running for Congress. Wesley Bell, you and I have spoken in the past when there was a chance that they would stay the execution, a fancy way of saying to continue for time to investigate the possibility that he was in fact innocent. What is your reaction tonight knowing that that did not happen and he is now dead?
Now, I do want to tell you who this guy is, just in case you may have forgotten. This is Wesley Bell. This is the politician that primary challenged primary challenged Cori Bush. He's the one that AIPAC put a lot of money behind him to get Cori Bush out of Congress. That's who this is. So just FYI. Wild, fam.
Justice, the interests of justice were not served. And as a prosecutor, as you know, as a former prosecutor, our job is not to get convictions, it's not to collect stats, it's to bring justice. And for us, for the folks that in my office, Lathrop GPM, Matthew Jacoby, Elena McMullen, Teresa Hurla, my office, the Conviction Incident Review Unit led by Jessica Hathaway. We're talking about folks who invested blood, sweat, and now tears to spare his life because it was the right thing to do. If there's the shadow of a doubt with respect to innocence or the integrity of a conviction, at the very least, that individual should not be executed.
So I want to pause here for a second, and I do want to add something here to credit something that he said there about if there is a shadow of a doubt. That is true. And the fact that there was doubt that was presented, but not just doubt, but the fact that the prosecutor said this guy did not receive a fair trial, that in itself, again, is enough for the governor to stop the execution. 2, let's keep it real. When he said a prosecutor's job is not to get convictions, it's to get justice, that's bullshit. The prosecutor's job is to get a conviction. And the more convictions that prosecutors get, the higher they can move up in their career. That's just a reality. Like, stop that.
It is, to say disappointing would be an understatement. There were several opportunities on the timeline, if you will. Obviously, this case predated me originally. And so there's, 20 plus years ago, but throughout the appellate process and now once we have had an opportunity, there have been opportunities for decisions to be made that should have resulted in Mr. Williams' life being spared, and the system failed. It failed all of us.
You have to wonder why there was such a vested interest in the speed of this. After this was a murder from decades ago at this point in time, now that this was underway, why do you think there was the haste to do so? Given your office said no, the victims' families said no, he was not asking to be released. He wanted time to investigate further and was even willing to plead guilty to lesser charges. which I might add, there were people who said, well, hold on, that must mean that he's probably guilty. What's your response to that?
What he was willing to agree to was called an Alford plea, as you know, which he is not pleading guilty to the charges. He's acknowledging that there's enough evidence to convict him. But that was really for us to be able to buy time to be able to investigate his claims of innocence, because the execution date was set. If the execution date was stayed or just pushed back a few months to give us more time to investigate this matter, we may have been able to determine whether or not he was in fact innocent or not. But as you know, it's not just about innocence. It's also about the integrity of the conviction.
Right.
And there are serious, legitimate concerns about this conviction. And at the very least, he shouldn't be executed. That's what we're asking. This was not a dichotomy between execution or release. This was execution or life in prison without the possibility of parole. And then his team and him, and they would have time to vet his claims of innocence. But now we're looking at a family who had to relive this again. Felicia Gale's family had to relive this all over again. And as the prosecutor, I can't look them in the eye and say the right person was punished because we don't know.
And this is another thing I want to say, too. This does not give justice to the victim's family either. That's another thing. Now, it is not common that these types of situations will be granted, right? Like, it's not as common that a last minute ditch effort to try to get the governor to say, stop the execution. Most of the time that it doesn't go that way. But from what I understand about Marcellus Williams' particular case, again, anytime the prosecutor was willing to come forward, that does send off alarm bells. And I could say that to anyone. I think that in itself should have sent off a big whoa, let's pause the brakes here, right? That, and I don't believe that anybody should have to go through the death penalty. Never agreed with it. Never have, never will. But there was one case in particular that I did cover a couple of years ago where the governor did grant clemency. And that was with this particular gentleman here. His name is Julius Jones. And so if you've been watching me for a long time, for those of you who watched me at least 2 years ago, you may remember me covering this. I was sending out an alarm to people to tell people to call the governor. There were also protests for Julius Jones. I know when I was trying to call the governor, it was busy. Every time I tried to call was busy, but that was a good sign because that meant that everybody was trying to call. Now, in his particular case, I want to show you the governor of Oklahoma, which was Governor Stitt. He granted clemency to Julius Jones. So this is a time when it actually did work out. Now, Julius Jones isn't free, but Julius Jones was not executed because of the call. So this was an example where the governor did do the right thing. And I want to tell you something else I think that helped Julius Jones as well. NFL quarterback Baker Mayfield, he was another one of the people that wrote a letter to the governor that said, based on the new evidence that I have seen and I've read about, Julius Jones should not be executed and needs to be freed. Now, from what I understand, until this day, Julius Jones is not free, but I will continue to check on that particular case. But the thing about Julius Jones, again, he's been in prison since 1999, and it was just recently the same year that he was supposed to be executed. There were a number of incidents that were brought forward. It was new evidence about his particular case. One of those items said that there was no way that Julius Jones was even at the scene of the crime at that time. And so why is this important, right? Because oftentimes, particularly when it comes to Black males, oftentimes police officers, oftentimes a judge and jury, they will see one Black man and mistake him for another because for some reason they tend to think that all Black people look alike. And this has happened over and over again. There's been a number of times where someone who was a victim or someone who witnessed a crime, they'll say that, oh yeah, it was a Black man. And you can put them in front of a lineup of 5 or 6 or whatever Black men, and they could easily just point to the wrong person because they tend to think all Black men look alike. And that reminded me of Julius Jones. And I was like, willing to bet. That's what happened with him. That could also be what happened with Marcellus Williams. This is another reason why we need to remove the death penalty. Now, here's something that's really interesting for the people who were on social media and were trying to shame people who didn't vote for Hillary Clinton in 2016 and blame them for the reason why people are just ridiculous. This is why sometimes like people get so frustrated with liberals in particular, because people want to go back to 2016 and blame people who didn't vote for Hillary Clinton for everything that is wrong today. As if you know for a fact that Hillary Clinton would have made your life so much better. That's what is really disturbing to me. Instead of blaming our justice system, instead of blaming the governor for not granting that, they want to point fingers at us. But I want to show you something that the Democratic Party did that a lot of people are not talking about because they want to keep this hush. And this article was written August 31st, 2024. So this article is pretty recent. The end of the abolition era. Democrats quietly dropped their opposition to the death penalty. How many of you knew this? How many of you knew that the Democratic Party, they quietly dropped their opposition to the death penalty? So this is another example that shows you how the Democratic Party moved further to the right. Look at this. In 2020, Joe Biden pledged that if he was elected president, he would stop federal executions. Everybody remember this? Proposed legislation to abolish the death penalty at the federal level and provide incentives for states to follow suit, because we can't ensure that we get these cases right every time. Biden said this. Biden said it. He said we must eliminate the death penalty. That didn't happen. See, this is another one of those promises that Joe Biden made that I think a lot of people forget about. That year, the party also voiced its opposition to the death penalty in its platform. This year, however, marks a striking contrast. So far, Democrats have been silent about capital punishment. To date, Kamala Harris, its 2024 nominee, has said nothing about capital punishment. Moreover, as an article in the Huffington Post points out, this year the platform marks the first time since 2004 the platform has not mentioned the death penalty. In fact, the only mention of it in this year's DNC was made by 4 members of the so-called exonerated 5. They were convicted of a crime they did not commit in 1989, and they were reminded, the delegates, that Donald Trump had called for their execution. The Democrats' silence about capital punishment does not represent a principled retreat, but rather an understandable strategic calculation. Nonetheless, it is a missed opportunity to advance the abolitionist cause. So, does everybody see what has happened here? So now again, the Democratic Party, now all of a sudden not speaking out against the death penalty, slowly kind of just quietly walked away from that. And they mentioned Kamala Harris. And I noticed another thing. I didn't see Donald Trump or Kamala Harris say a damn thing about Marcellus Williams. Not one of them. Now, I don't expect Donald Trump to say it, but if Kamala Harris is supposed to be a Democrat, you would think she would give a damn. You would think she would give a damn about this black man who was innocent, who was just executed. And this is the thing that kills me. And this is the thing I've been telling people to pay attention to when it comes to Kamala Harris. The Democratic Party and corporate media keep wanting to say, vote for this black woman running for president. But you never hear this black woman really talk about black issues. You never really hear this so-called black woman, and we didn't went through all of that, but you never really hear her speaking out and fighting for these causes. Anytime she's interviewed and they ask her about the fact that she's struggling with black male voters, when they ask her about reparations, when they ask her about black issues, you can tell how she looks so uncomfortable. But everybody wants you, all these Democrats want you to vote for her because they said, you better not vote against a black woman. Silence. She said nothing. Not one damn thing. Why? Remember, she was a prosecutor. She's a part of the system. She's hawkish, or she's vowing to be hawkish on the border, even though she ain't been doing her job at the border this whole time and she was assigned to it. She's vowing to be hawkish with the police. She wants to give more money to the police. She said nothing. And you have all these black commentators like Roland Martin saying, how dare you speak badly about Kamala Harris? You guys better support her. That's a black woman right there. When do you see Kamala Harris supporting the black community? You couldn't even tweet about it. Now, let me show you what AOC did in reference to this conversation. Now, AOC decides to tweet also yesterday, or excuse me, what was yesterday? Tuesday. We must abolish the death penalty. Who are you talking about, AOC? What do you mean? We must abolish the death penalty. AOC couldn't even say his name. Professor Zinkus came in here and said his name is Marcellus Williams, and you waited till they murdered him to tweet this. Shame. So do you see, does everybody see the game? Like, it just, these random tweets that you just put out there to make it look like you really care or give a damn, they weren't following this. She wasn't paying attention to Marcellus Williams. She didn't really give a damn. She can't even say his name. But the Democratic Party, they want you to believe that they're going to be the best when it comes to criminal justice, when it comes to policing, and when it comes to the black community. What happened to Marcellus Williams, it's horrendous. And it happens more often than people realize. And I think what more people are starting to see, and I'm glad for social media, I think what more people are starting to see is that for once, they're waking up to the fact that, you know what? The Democrats don't care about us either. It's a hot mess,